Hello and welcome to InSolidarity, a podcast by the SEWA Cooperative Federation.
अभी तो बहुत बड़ा सपना है हमारा.
મારા કામની બહુ જ જરૂરત તમે મને લઈ જાઓ.
अब हम लोग के पास कैपिटल आ गया. अब हम लोग खुल के करेंगे बिजनेस.
સમયમાં તો જોવા જઈએ તો આપણે બધો કામમાં જ સમય જાય છે. પોતાના માટે સમય કાઢવો બહુ મુશ્કેલ હોય છે.
अभी हम लोग मतलब ये पैसा राउंड होते होते हम लोग 12-13 लाख का बिजनेस चल रहा है.
Climate change is reshaping lives, especially for informal women workers who depend on local livelihoods. In her book Anubandh, late Elaben Bhatt reminds us that environmental degradation isn't just about distant problems. It's about the destruction of the very ecosystems women rely on for food, shelter, and work. Together with scientists, experts, and community leaders, we explore how women-led collectives and cooperatives in the informal economy can inspire new solutions that blend tradition, innovation, and solidarity. Join us as we unpack these emerging ideas that redefine resilience and climate action from the ground up. Today, we're really excited to have Dr. Ranjitha Puskur, who is Principal Scientist at the International Rice Research Institute, where she leads research on gender and livelihoods. She also leads the evidence module at the CGIAR gender platform. Ranjitha, welcome. It's really great to have you.
Thank you, Neha. This is an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for having me here.
So, just to set the context, we'll start with a quick word association game, and I'll say a word and you have to speak the first word that comes to mind. So,
Okay. Right.
Okay. So, let's begin. Farmer.
Woman.
Resilience.
Strength.
Collectives.
Power.
Seeds.
Life.
Adaptation.
Good question. Climate.
Leadership.
Women.
Market.
Seed.
Climate.
Floods.
Equity.
Women.
Research.
Science.
Practice.
Development.
Oh, all right. So that was really interesting.
Wow. Interesting. I've never done this before. So, wow. Okay.
Interconnections, and it's also set up context for the kind of work that you do. So just taking off from there, we know that you work at the intersection of policy change, research, and practice. So can you tell our listeners what a day at work typically looks like for you, and what most excites you about the work, and what's also most challenging?
Okay. So I'm really not sure if I have a typical day at work. It varies very, very wildly. And I guess that's also what keeps me excited and motivated. There's never a dull day in my life. If, let's say I'm at my base, which is currently Hyderabad, and in the office, I think I spend a lot of time reading, analysis, writing, and the writing could be, journal articles, it could be blogs, it could be proposals. Quite some time goes in meetings with my team, with my partners who are spread sort of throughout India, but also all over the world. I also travel a lot for work, and that would be to meet and plan with partners, who could be government organizations, non-governmental organizations, meet with policymakers, workshops, dialogues. But whenever I travel, I also try and spend as much time as I can in the field so that I'm interacting with the communities and women that we work with. And that for me is actually the best part of my work, my favorite. Being with women farmers, hearing their stories, seeing their strength. It grounds me completely, reminds me why this work matters. And I always learn so much doing that. Such a reality check. I mean, it shows us how little we know, how much we assume and take, how we take many things for granted. So every day there's something new to learn. or maybe even unlearn, let's say. Challenging is for me, trying to influence policymakers, decision makers, to appreciate and use evidence, the knowledge and science that we generate to inform policy. It's fun doing that. Again, you learn so much, but it is extremely challenging. Thank you.
Right.
So, I mean, Ranjitha, we know that you've been doing extensive research across South Asia on women farmers.
Mm.
So, my next question is, how are women working in agriculture, also trades like animal husbandry, how are they experiencing the impacts of climate change? If you could talk about the South Asian context, I know that's really big, but if you could share some broad trends.
Talking about agriculture, I mean, when I say agriculture, for me, that means crops, livestock, fish, the CG kind of definition that we have. So women farmers are experiencing, I think it is the biggest crisis that they are facing these days. And the impacts they have are so deeply gendered and so diverse, depending on, what their roles are in their farms, in their households, their socio-economic status, their access to resources, the norms in the context in which they are living and working, serious impacts on livelihoods. I mean, increasingly, rainfall is erratic, there is heat stress, there's droughts, floods, things, all of these in unanticipated ways. So as a result, yields are fluctuating, season after season, crops are failing, feed and fodder is in short supply, more and more, incidents of pests and diseases, and all that directly affects their food production, incomes, and affecting, therefore, their food and nutrition security. And because of the climate change, increasingly men are migrating out of the rural areas in search of work. Women sort of de facto become the household heads, but then they don't have land rights, they don't have access to capital, credit or extension services. Therefore, their adaptation to these changes is becoming very, very hard for them. There's a lot of planning that goes on for climate adaptation at various levels. But women are never, very underrepresented, I would say. Extension networks, all these new ag tech platforms that we talk about, they don't have access to all those. They don't have a seat at the table. And therefore, they do not have sort of knowledge of all these new, innovations, be it stress-tolerant crop varieties or, climate-smart agricultural practices. So that does affect them. And climate change is also having an impact on biodiversity. And women are the ones who have historically depended on natural resources for their livelihoods. Because of these kinds of impacts, they are pushed to, take loans from informal sources, and then, or they sell their assets like, goats and poultry and gold that they have. So whatever little assets they have, evidence actually shows that whenever a climate shock hits or whatever, the first assets that are sold in distress are the small ones that belong to the women.
Right.
Very few financial safety nets, so therefore recovering is much harder for them. And therefore, they tend to these coping strategies which often lead to maladaptation. They have to intensify their labor, or they reduce what they eat or the quality of what they eat. We've also seen instances in South Asia where, they have to stop sending children to school, and all these have very long-term adverse effects. As we are talking about, natural resources, they now have to walk longer distances to fetch water, fodder. A lot of women still use fuel wood in many parts. And because, in South Asia, I think the numbers say that women actually spend 30% more time collecting water in drought-affected regions compared to others. And all this actually increases their time and labor burden. And they also now spend longer hours to cope with the aftermath of the shocks and stresses. A flood comes or heavy rainfall, they have to protect their animals. Accessing potable water becomes difficult. They have to salvage their crops, floods or drought. And these additional burdens actually mean that, they have less time to take any rest, have any leisure activities, take care of children or get themselves educated or take up some other income generating activities. Having said all that, we've also seen great examples of women who are not, women and their groups who are demonstrating that they are not just very passive victims of climate change. They do face burdens disproportionately more than men, but with their knowledge, local knowledge, their adaptive mechanisms and social networks, they are actually at the forefront of, building resilience. It's actually amazing when you look at their strength and their resilience and how they are able to pick up the pieces and then live their lives. So much to learn from them. Yeah.
Right. And it's actually, it's interesting to hear what evidence is telling us about all the multifarious impacts of climate change. And in fact, a lot of what you talked about, the challenges that women farmers faced in general, I think when the SEWA movement began and when collectivization first happened, when the women were organized, and even today, the idea is to help as a collective, you can overcome a lot of these barriers. So this actually brings me to the next question, and you've touched upon it a little bit when you're speaking about adaptation. You've also done research specifically on women collectives and adaptation. So what is the evidence telling us about the potential for collectives to support adaptation, and how does this translate into resilience in the long term?
Last couple of years, the CGIAR gender platform, we have supported some evidence synthesis, evidence generation on collective action, South Asia, but also Middle East and North Africa region, but also more global kind of synthesis of evidence to see, what's happening on that front. More specifically, how are these collectives contributing to resilience? In Bangladesh, we've seen aquaculture groups actually helped women access ponds to lease, and then also negotiated fair input prices so they get better incomes and nutrition. Through these collectives, women also are able to get information on climate resilient practices, early warning systems, inputs that they need. And what we have also seen is that in these networks of women, they exchange knowledge, experiences, learning, and that actually builds their confidence. Also, if at all there's any tendency for risk aversion, that seems to go down when they are in their collectives. So there is some, pretty good examples of how these collectives are helping. See, the financial safety nets are so important for women. Whenever, there is a shock or a stress, a crisis, they need money to overcome it. So a lot of these saving schemes, rotating credit schemes are helping them, invest in assets like, water tanks or goats to overcome some of those, but also start building the assets. Or if there is a crop failure in a certain season, it helps you overcome that shock, provide a buffer. And then mechanisms for collective insurance, insuring through the collectives or asset pooling, that also reduces their vulnerability. I mean, and we've also seen cases where women are, through their advocating for climate services, inputs, safety nets from governments, their programs, etc., advocating for those collectively and being very successful about it. We've seen examples of community seed banks in different parts of South Asia, different parts of India, collective action for water management, and all those, as I was saying earlier, goes beyond individual benefit, and they're actually creating public goods which enhances their own climate resilience, but also that of the broader community. We've also seen agroforestry initiatives which are being taken up, so that you're also able to protect that biodiversity and diversify.
Right. So another question on women as leaders in the farming or in agri-food systems. What kind of policy shifts can help them emerge as leaders?
Great question. I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. And I think we've been talking about this. Everybody, I think, understands evidence across sectors shows that women's leadership brings better results, better impacts, higher, wider impacts. But it is still, quite a challenge. Take the example of India. We have a lot of policy frameworks, which actually say, we are promoting women's participation in local governance, let's say. A third to 50% reservation in Panchayati Raj or the PACs, agricultural credit societies. But is that really meaningful leadership? Are women able to make decisions? They are all token representatives. Often the male relatives or dominant community members, the male ones, are actually making all the decisions. So we need to make sure women are actually holding functional positions, not just symbolic, titles. And given the barriers that they have faced all their lives, and there is a crisis of confidence in a lot of women, how do we build their capacities, and which will lead to them having, better self-esteem and higher confidence, building capacities for public speaking, negotiation, leadership, all those become very, very critical, but also very impactful. And in these institutions, wherever they are, we have these women leaders. We have to keep monitoring whether these women are, just present in the meeting or basically in the attendance registers. Are they also able to speak? Have their voices been heard? Are they included in decision making? Looks like, where there are some examples we've seen from Rajasthan, Orissa. Women sarpanches, they've had greater impact, but when they are supported by women's federations or have been engaged in learning exchanges with peers from, other parts of their state or country or whatever. So we do need, and women we know lack financial literacy, digital literacy, all these kinds of institutional processes, awareness about policies, what are their entitlements, etc. So we really need training, very targeted, tailored training on some of these aspects for them. And I think we need mentorship programs as well. The basic problem, even today, 2025, women are still not recognized as farmers because they do not have land titles. So can we expand some of the eligibility criteria in FPOs or PACs where, cultivators, tenants, group farmers, they can all become members and be identified as farmers? I think we should probably also suggest that a lot of these benefit schemes, be it the subsidy schemes, credit, there's a lot of those out there actually. Can we gender tag them? Basically to track how much actually reaches and benefits women. There is also, we've been incubating women farmer producer companies, FPOs in Orissa, a lot more in Orissa than anywhere else. And we've basically stuck to a women-led, women-only model. It has its challenges, but that seems to work. Interestingly, in Bengal as well, where we said, hey, if we really want a transformative change in the society, we've got to include men and boys. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So maybe we should not just have all women meetings with you guys. Maybe we should also invite them. They said they were so strong, firm about it. They were like, no, we do not want men coming and sitting in our meetings. We will not have the same space. We will not be able to talk and discuss in the same way. So basically, we are now saying, okay, we can't go against that. How do we bring which are the meetings where we want these people to have their voices and then be able to make decisions? Are there other kinds of meetings where we could also bring the men in as more like information sharing, etc.? So yeah, I think lots of stuff that could be done, but we need to be very, very thoughtful about it.
That was really, really amazing, and it's really inspiring to hear these ideas that beyond quotas move towards capacity building, including soft skills training, leadership, and also creating spaces for women's voices to be heard. I had planned that for my last question, I'd ask you a policy-related question, but we've already spoken quite a bit about that. But I'd really like to hear from you on, what are some ways in which upcoming researchers or, young people who want to get into research as a profession, how can they have a co-creation lens where research then is not extractive, but is something that is also owned by communities. It is something that also serves the community.
Right. So this is what I like to call, and that is how it is defined. So research for development. Basically research not just for the sake of research where we, go very extractively, collect some data, write a few papers, and then publish it maybe in some fancy journals, add it to our CV and get our promotions. But it is about research that is meant or designed to have development impact. So research for development. It's a lot of participatory action research that goes in. It is about being very thoughtful. I used to be a very desktop researcher until I finished my PhD and started working. I loved crunching numbers. But then once I hit the ground, a tiny fraction of that actually reaches the poorest men and women farmers, and those are the people who need it the most. So how do we change that? So being intentional about it, what are you trying to do? Even the research, the whole research prioritization, agenda setting has to be demand driven. I think we have to start from the ground with the women, because they are a majority of the farming population. So I'm talking about agricultural research. Sit with them, try and understand what their most important challenges are, and then develop your research agendas based on that. But then as you design it as well, you co-design even the research project, which should be iterative, have those feedback loops, test some of these solutions with them. But what we have also seen is that a lot of these studies establish, re-establish, revalidate that there is a problem. Enough diagnosis. We know these problems are there. We've been talking about it for 4 decades now. But and having said that, there are also some good examples. So try and understand which solution works for which groups of men and women in a particular context. What makes it work? Which basically also means you need quantitative plus qualitative kind of information. bring it all together, have a lot of stakeholder consultations, talk to them, and one thing that I always say to a lot of the young researchers or students is, every time you write that recommendation section, imagine you have been tasked with implementing those recommendations. Put yourselves in the shoes of those implementers or people who you are advising and say, if I were told to do this, would I be able to do this? Is this realistic? Is this feasible? So move away from all those very fluffy, broad, vague, abstract recommendations. We've got to develop or generate more evidence on solutions that work, solutions that can be scaled.
Great. So, you did mention that you finished your PhD and you enjoyed the number crunching. So I understand that the disciplinary grounding is something that is a non-negotiable. But then moving forward, being intentional about and mindful of who's setting the agenda, being intentional about co-creating the research and the design, the research design and methods, and also solutions. So those were some great practical insights and a great note to end this episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Puskur, for your time and for this insightful conversation. To our listeners, Solidarity is built on knowledge, a shared vision and action, and we hope these conversations can help inspire and leave us with some ideas for action. So that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it further. For more insights on cooperatives and collectives led by grassroots informal women workers, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for listening.